right at 4 o'clock, so.
Very good.
So I'd like to call the Legal Committee meeting for Thursday, May 26th to order. The clerk will call roll, please.
Counselor Hildebrand.
Present.
Counselor Arnold.
Present.
Counselor Oropesa. Counselor Corn. Here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. If I could get a motion for the approval of the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor by signifying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Approved 4 to 0, because I said nay and yay. So if I can get a motion for the approval of the minutes for the meeting of April 25th and the meeting of April 28th.
I'll second.
All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. There being no nays, so approved. First item on the agenda is the Armstrong Task Order E, which is considering recommending an approval of an expenditure of $244,500 for design and construction engineering services. To start,
Afternoon,
please.
councilors. Let me start with the number. When you add the GRT to it, it's 268,653. Just to make that clear that 244 number is without GRT. And then there's a small change on the financial consideration. A reference to a grant is in there in the second line. There is no existing grant at this point. We have applied for the grant. We'll get that grant number later. I'll correct these things as we go into the council abstract. But this is for a task order for the preliminary engineering review for the runway 1735 project, which is to basically reconstruct runway 1735 when we get to the end of the project. This is just the first step in that. It is an outgrowth of the 2020 RFP process we did to hire Armstrong Consultants as our engineering consultant for the airport, and this PSA will be in addition to that. The city attorney has approved the professional services agreement, and I stand for questions.
Shall there be any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stark, would you bring me up to speed on the recent closure of 1735? What was all that about?
The one that we did this year was all associated with the Alpha and Juliet project. There were actually two closures, but the main one was with the Alpha and Juliet project. So what happened there was same thing as this project is. We had to go all the way down to subgrade to dirt, rebuild both of those taxiways, which meant, of course, bringing that all the way up to the hold line. And when we started doing runway markings and taxiway markings past the hold line onto the runway, but either way, into the RSA to rebuild that taxiway. So that's why that runway was closed for that full time period. The second short one for a couple of days was when we had to move the wind cone to get it outside of the runway safety area.
Okay. And so this is kind of a continuation of that project?
No, this is a totally separate project. It's just, this will be a multi-year project. The PER is just the first step to get that report done. Then design will be next year. And then after that, we'll go actually into bidding and construction.
So if I understood your comments correctly, you're trying to get an approval for $250,000, and there's grants that you've requested, but we don't know what the status of those grants are.
The status of the grant is that we put in the application, and sorry, that never happens to me.
Just did.
It just
Don't ever
did.
say never again.
I know. I just jinxed myself. But no, the normal process is it takes a year to go through it. So we start with an objective. FA reviews that. They come back. They say, yeah, they like it. We start doing the development of it. And one like this, because it requires more than the entitlement AIP money, it requires some discretionary money, is a little different. You spread that over multiple years because it's a larger piece. And the last piece will be the biggest in construction. But once they begin that objective and they agree to it, then the grant process starts rolling, actually for this one back in September of last year. So we're to the point now where they have said, okay, we like everything you're doing, put in the grant, and we should expect to see the grant in August or September, but it will happen before the end of the federal fiscal. And yes, we're asking for that 268 number, the 268,653. Without saying it's guaranteed, because the FAA won't say that, it is pretty much guaranteed.
Okay, so what's the percentage match on this grant?
It's a
if
90-10
we're
grant.
successful?
So basically 90-10, so they'll do 90, we'll do the other 10%, half between us and state aviation. So
Okay,
there will also be a state aviation grant come along with this later.
so if we get the grants, then this is minimum impact on the city budget or the airport budget?
Correct. We're paying 5%.
And when do you anticipate starting this project, after you hear about the grant?
Yeah, as soon as we get the grant, we'll begin the project, since this is a planning project.
Okay. I'm done.
Mr. Stark, is this $300,000 expenditure included in the preliminary budget for 2023?
I believe it was included in this year's budget, so it'll have to be carried over, so it will be included.
It is included
Yes.
in the current, so those funds have been
Yes.
encumbered in your current budget
Yes.
for the full amount of 350 or whatever the
and
gross receipts tax are.
That's correct. The reason for that is because FAAs, like I said, they run on their own schedule. Sometimes they get grants out early in this year, but it's always right around that break point of June 30 and July 1. So sometimes it runs a little later. This year looks like it's going to be later, but so we always have to budget it in basically the year that before we think we'll get it, and then carry it over. It almost always works that way.
Okay. Any further questions?
Yeah, I don't see any of our financial team here, Mr. Chairman, but
You don't want,
I don't see any of our financial team here.
that would have been nice if someone
So-
from finance would have been here.
The question I have, I thought I answered it, but got an answer, is that it's in the 2022. I can't recall, we talked about it in Finance Committee, those things that are already going to be encumbered, and we put them off to the side. I don't remember this particular project. I've got it back here behind me, but I thought we were not having a finance meeting. So I guess my question is, and I don't expect you to answer it, is that if it's not in those documents that we reviewed, and I don't remember this coming up, then it would impact that $17 million cash carryover that we have in the budget we're going to vote on here in a few hour or so. And I just want to make sure that that 17 million is a good number, whichever way this one goes.
Yeah, I don't have, I left that,
And if it were not in either one of these budgets, it would just be because we don't have the grant yet.
Okay.
So that's the sense I can make of it.
I don't want to slow this up, but be prepared for more questions at a later date.
any further questions? Do I hear a motion?
I move that we adopt. Does this go to the city council from here?
Yes.
Not this meeting this afternoon,
No.
regular meeting.
It'll go to the regular meeting.
Okay, well, Mr. Chairman, I make a promise that I'll track it down.
Pardon?
I'll get an answer to my question before we,
You want to send it to full council and not a consent item? I mean, you'll get a question answered if you send it by full council.
right,
So is your motion to send it to full council?
yeah, I think that's where we're at. So I move that we move, agenda item number 2. No, item 1, Armstrong Task Order E, to the full city council for their recommendation.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to send item 1, considering recommending approval of the expenditure for the design and construction for engineering services to the full council. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There being none, motion pass. Thank you. Item number 2, which is the Roswell Chaves County EDC renewal. Ms. Jennings.
Good afternoon, members of the legal committee. I'm here to present the renewal for the Roswell Chaves County Economic Development Corporation Service Agreement. The city was asked to approve this scope of service for fiscal year 23. A little bit of background: in 2019, the city went through all community agreements to realign them to include a scope of work as well as some metrics that would be submitted quarterly. This new agreement will follow the fiscal year and the budget cycle. The current contract amount is $100,000. New funding request for fiscal year 23 was an additional $100,000 recommended from the EDC to cover costs of new personnel for a digital marketing and designer, as well as increase in salary for their current program manager and an increase in costs for daily services and functions. On May 14th, 2022, EDC presented to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee approved $150,000 allocation for fiscal year 23 with a 3-0 vote. And then on May 20th, the Finance Committee voted 4-0 to allocate it back to $100,000 until we could have our presentation today. A little bit about the scope of work. The contract amount that is being requested is $200,000. Their scope of work is business development and retention, as well as technical services. Part of the metrics includes the quarterly report on the following efforts, which is their recruitment efforts, their profit and loss budget versus actuals, educational opportunities, job creation, retail report, promotional campaigns, and cooperative efforts within the community. They are also required within this contract to present an annual report to the full city council, which Mr. Espiritu will do at the next city council meeting to honor the current contract. And then the last item in the contract is their annual strategic plan, which is presented to our city manager. And Mr. Espiritu is here. I will stand for any questions that you might have.
They are required to do an audit.
In their report, I believe if one is available, yes.
Yeah, I think
And they did in your packet, there was their financial statements and the last audit that they had done.
Is that a requirement funding for them also? Do you know? And I know it's a separate item, but by the county as well, because they receive funding from the county.
Yes, in one of the reports in the packet that they presented, I believe they received $150,000 from the county.
Yep, correct. So, any other questions? Councilor Corn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I get Mr. Espiritu up here, because I want to talk to him about some specifics in the documents that's been presented. A quick review of your documents. I just got this packet this morning, so I've had other things on my agenda, but I've gone through it. Although I did get the web deal, and this my third review of these documents. So my question to you is, you say in here in several places that your goal to visit 40 area businesses a month. How's that working for you?
Mr. Chairman, Counselor, that's working well. It's sometimes a difficult target with all the activities we have in our office, but we have met that goal this year of 480 businesses this past. Well, we will have 480 businesses this year, but we are on track. We have met that every month, 40 businesses every month, sir, and we've done that for 2 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Glad to hear that. So we've had lots of job fairs in the community over the last 6-8 months since the reduction of COVID. So could you briefly explain to me your involvement in those job fairs?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Counselor, we've had 4 or 5. I'm losing track of how many we've had. We have, in cooperation and collaboration with the City of Roswell, they hosted the job fair so we can have it here at the Convention Center free because of its access to the citizens of this area. We partnered with the Department of Workforce Solutions. We went out and solicited businesses throughout the county, and the recent job fair we just had was fairly successful. We had 43 companies represented, about 123 job seekers. Preliminary numbers of hires were about 25. Of course, there's some that the companies can't share because they've got to go through the process of background checks and things of that nature. I think those have been very good. We've had a lot of companies. The state has told us that we've probably seen more people, they have seen more people at our job fairs than they've seen anywhere in the state. And I think it's because we do a lot of marketing out of our own budget to help get the word out to people.
Okay, I noticed in reading through your documents that that you all have appeared in behalf of many businesses at public meetings.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, Counselor, we appear, in fact, we appear before companies to represent them as it impacts their business. I've represented, I'm not represented them, but I've testified on their behalf on their economic impact of their business as is applicable, such as several job training incentive programs, JCHIP requests funded by the state. These are for trainees, which are new jobs or higher level jobs that meet the thresholds of the state. We here in Roswell Chavez County have seen a number of them, and this past year we've had 3 successful awards. Every award we've worked with companies, they've received every penny of what they requested, which is pretty good. Secondly, we testify for companies like Pecos Valley Productions and their economic impact on what they are trying to achieve in the community. We also testify for the Cromanata Group in their rezoning application before the P&Z, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the City Council, and the impact they have economically in our community for people to understand. And recently, we testified and advocated for the Admiral Beverage Corporation, as you may recall, the IRB that you all worked so hard on to get them to get established in that wonderful building they have on Brasher. Our job is business advocacy, Mr. Chairman. You know, we may not be the zoning gurus, but we do understand the point of the economic impact, and that is create jobs, create wealth, create tax for our community, and create opportunity.
I also note that that you all coordinate a lot with Eastern Roswell and the other schools, but I'm going to concentrate on Eastern Roswell in the time that we have, Mr. Chairman. So I know that I feel that you have great relationships with the folks at the university. Can you talk about 2 or 3 programs that you've been involved with and tell me what the outcome has been?
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, Counselor, we are a strong partnership with the university. We've worked pathways for all our young people through all those school districts in the county to create pathways to the university to the programs, because that's really needed to create that workforce for tomorrow. Recently, this year, it was over a year project to create a new certification program. It's a general industrial technician program. They can complete it in 2 semesters and get a certification on general mechanical, which includes automotive, welding, HVAC, and things of that nature. So instead of having to wait through an entire program like the aircraft maintenance technician program, which is a 2-year program, they can take that course and get to work someplace with some skill sets versus waiting and trying to hopefully acquire them someplace else. We also have worked with Eastern in a number of scholarships, one with the New Mexico Solar Group. And as you know, they're a company in New Mexico that installs solar panels. They wanted to provide some opportunity for young people that become electricians into that field, and they awarded several $1,000 scholarships this past year. I believe the work that Eastern does is essential to our ability to create a workforce for tomorrow. I cannot attract a company if we don't have a workforce here, and Eastern is our greatest resource, and that's why I think our relationship is so good, because Dr. Powell is in lockstep with us to move forward our community.
You've appeared in support of Ascent Aviation, new business coming to town. We've had some meetings with those folks. I had meetings with them when I was on the county commission. I mean, it's a long road we've been on, but they require to have special licenses for their employees, and Eastern can supply those licenses. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Counselor, they require what's called a FAA, Federal Aviation Association, A&P mechanics certification, which A&P is airframe and power plant. It's a 2-year program. Our university is only one of 2 in New Mexico. One of 2, the other one in Albuquerque. We have worked hard with grants with Eastern to help facilitate larger classrooms, and they've done that. They've doubled their classrooms, they've doubled their instructor staff recently, and we look forward to that program. We're really working through the system to help not just Ascent, but all the other aviation companies that exist already at the Air Center and those that we intend to attract.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I was looking at this packet, and it says audit, but what I'm seeing is a compilation report by your accountants, not an audit. So I don't have an audit in my package. I have a compilation report, which is totally different than an audit.
We can go back and I can look with Mr. Espiritu. We did have our finance director review the packet for financials. She didn't have any huge concerns, but it's something that I can work with because they still have about 30 days before the end of this current contract.
Going to cause you any additional expense.
Sure.
But if you're supplying one to the county, I mean, it's a dual purpose, but it's not in our packet.
Mr. Chairman, we perform an audit every year. We provided the last audit because we're in the same fiscal year as the city and the county.
Right.
So our fiscal year isn't over yet. So we won't actually do this past year's audit until sometime July, August timeframe, and we always provide those as soon as it's provided. The last audit was provided to the city back last year. If there isn't a copy, I'm happy to provide another copy.
I can look.
Would you? And then
Sure.
you can just forward it to us via email? I'd be happy with that. I'm just saying it's not in here,
Sure.
and we talk about that. Mr. Espiritu, I got to ask you a question that concerning your agreement and are you satisfied with everything that's in this agreement, or are there items that you think should have been added or should have been deleted, which may or may not improve what you're doing for this community?
Mr. Chairman, I will share with you. It's a
And
pleasure.
I'm asking for total honesty. I mean, you don't have to hide anything because, I'm going to offend somebody. You're not going to offend anyone. And if they get offended, too bad.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, it's a pleasure to serve this community and this great county that we live in. It truly is. Because at the end of the day, if we're able to create jobs for some citizens, they're going to be able to pay their bills and feed their families, and you understand how all that works.
Yep.
The only thing I saw in the contract is an area that is a little troublesome for me because we can't control it. We can to a certain extent, but we can't really control it, and that's the facade grant. I'm not sure if you understand how that facade grant works. We set aside funds to award up to $5,000 matching grants to any business in the community. It used to be just Main Street businesses, but we opened it up to the entire county, as a matter of fact. The issue is although we set aside money, and in our 480 visits, Mr. Chairman, Counselor, we tell these businesses about this grant, and I can't control who applies for it. And although I project that we'll Fund 3, I can't make anyone submit a grant application.
Right.
And that's my only concern. Through this, I've read the contract, I've worked through it. I'm not offended by it or concerned by anything or the measurements. Those metrics came from me because I believe they're reasonable, they're achievable. And actually, our internal metrics are much more strict than this because obviously we want to have a high bar. So to answer your question, that's the only issue I have is that facade grant, the wording, because I can't control who actually applies because it says we will award 3. I can't award 1 if nobody applies for it. That would be my only suggestion to make a change, sir.
But is there any Mr. Patterson, I'm going to ask you this question. Is there any penalty to the ED for not
Well, I
performing
mean, practically speaking, I don't think that the city would fuss about that. I mean, but technically in the legal sense, yeah, if it says shall, it's a requirement of performance on their side of the contract. So I think we can look at that and maybe we can massage that language to say something like, we can put a limit on there that, or a proviso that you shall, assuming you get actual applications, award 3 or whatever. I mean, we can play with that language a little bit to make it clear that things beyond their control are not them. They're not in breach of the contract based on things that they're not able to do.
So would you be pleased with that if the wording was changed?
Yes, sir.
So do I hear a motion to create that wording change for the contract as explained by city attorney?
Mr. Chairman, I'm kind of skeptical until I see the language, but in principle, I'll make a motion to, because this is going to Finance Committee. We're not turning it loose yet. And because, as you know, we've had a discussion with EDC and the Hispano Chamber just to get a feel for what they're doing, if you remember correctly. And I don't have a problem with looking at some language in finance and giving them a chance to work it out.
Hey, Counselor, yes. If you want to make the motion, then at the next meeting, you'll see the language there and you'll have an opportunity at that time to either adopt it or ask for a change to that language.
With those stipulations, I move.
I'll second.
Further discussion?
I just actually had a couple questions of Ms. Jennings. Just to educate myself on, I guess, all of these organizations since they're coming up, can you kind of go over the steps that the city goes through and how often do we do these annually? And then kind of, I guess, how the whole, not the whole process, but kind of give me the Reader's Digest version of what happens. That way I'm kind of understanding what we're going through.
Yes, ma'am. So we, back in 2019, we revamped all of the community partner contracts to include a scope of work and metrics. All of them are aligned with a 4-year agreement. Some of them have up to 1-year extension renewals. And what our process has been is that we ask in the contract by April 15th that they submit a funding request to the city. Every quarter they submit their quarterly report, so we check off, make sure everything is included in there. And then we have their funding request that we submit as part of our preliminary budget. Then part of the contract is that all of these organizations come and present an annual presentation to the city council. And so the normal process that we've had in the past is they'd give us our funding request, they come to a legal committee for their contract, they go to finance committee for the funding, and then they go to city council for full approval before the end of the fiscal year to start the next fiscal year. Sometimes because of the timing of where they are at, the dates don't align, and that's why you'll notice in this one we want to align it with the fiscal year. We haven't in the past foresee that we wouldn't extend the contract, and so we do give them up to that June 30th date, and then of course, leniency to give them time to get an audit, get a financial review, turn in additional documents. But that has been our process in the past. When we first did it, we met with them pretty often to come up with the language, prepare the metrics, ask them, what do you want to be measured on? As you heard from Mr. Espiritu, these were some of his ideas. So that's been our process.
Okay, so when they actually do the quarterly, when they do the quarterly reports,
Mhm.
and that goes to Mr. Fuentes in a somewhat sense that if there's anything found wrong, what are the measures that are taken?
We give them time to either turn it in. I'll usually send an email saying it was missing this, this, and this. We need to have it before, the next quarter, and also before the invoice is paid.
Okay, so no actual audit is specifically required of the entities unless they choose to do it themselves, like an outside audit from an outside agency?
As far as the financial audit,
Yes.
each of them are different. So for this one, it does include an audit. For the Hispano Chamber Agreement, it says financial review, or if an audit is available based on their monetary amount. The rule or the law is anything over $500,000 that an organization, they're required by law to have an audit.
Mm-hmm.
In the case that Hispano Chamber, theirs is it's like $30,000. So
Right.
the contract at that time said financial review would be appropriate.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question for you, Mr. Patterson. Are we just renewing the contract because it says here that they have a funding increase? Are we also approving that funding increase at this time?
You're recommending the contract amendment document at this time. But yeah, as Juanita said, the actual funding amount will be considered by the Finance Committee. So for example, right now the document says $150,000, which was, I think, the last discussion that Finance may have had. But if Finance decides we want it to be this or that, then when it goes to Council, that number will be adjusted based on what the recommendation of Finance is. But as legal, we're asking you to take a look at the contract amendment document and approve that document.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that I've had a second, any further discussion? All in favor by the amendment?
I don't think you've had a vote on the amendment yet.
That's what we're getting ready to do. We've got a
Good.
we got a motion and a second, so we're getting ready to vote on that amendment.
Okay, yes.
So, I think I got a first out of you, did I not? On the amendment.
The amendment to the wording?
Bit of the wording of the contract. You got a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, can you explain, or can somebody explain what exactly is the amendment that we're voting on?
Yes, we're going to amend the provision, and I was looking for it. I haven't found it in here yet, so because I wanted to see it, but I remember it, that the facade grant provision shall be modified, that that the EDC shall not be required to grant 5 or 3 grants if they don't receive the applications.
Okay, but the amount of 150 stands as is.
That has not been amended by
Okay.
anybody as of right now.
Favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
There being no opposed, motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilors, appreciate it.
Thank you. So now we need to move on. Is that all we need to do here?
No,
Well,
we got,
you approved the amendment, but you haven't approved the agreement yet. So now you have to have a
Mr.
motion to
Chairman.
recommend it.
I move that we move this to the Finance Committee.
That's appropriate.
I'll second.
Any discussion? So we have a motion to approve and a second to approve the agreement with the Roswell Chaves County EDC, but sending it to Finance Committee for their approval on the monetary amount.
Yes.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
There being no opposed, motion passes. Item 3 to the agenda is the Hispano Chamber Agreement Renewal. Ms. Jennings.
All right. Good afternoon, Legal Committee. I'm here to present the Hispano Chamber of Commerce Service Agreement. Again, the City Council is asked to approve the scope of work within this agreement. In 2019, all community partner agreements were revised to include a scope of work and metrics. The new agreement will follow the same fiscal year and budget cycle. The current amount of the contract is $30,000 per year. A new funding request for fiscal year 23 was in the amount of an additional $20,000 to cover the cost of part-time office and social media staff member in order to have a more online marketing presence. On 4/27 of 22, they presented to this legal committee. It was tabled until today. The Hispano Chamber provided their annual report to the City Council on May 12th, as outlined in their current contract. The total contract amount being requested is $50,000 per year, with their scope of work broken down between business development retention, professional enhancements, administrative cost. Their metrics are pretty similar to the last quarterly reports: activities, profit and loss, budget versus actual, growth of participation activities, staffing changes, promotional campaigns, cooperative efforts with other organizations. The one difference is that audit language, where it does say financial review or audit if available, as well as their annual report to City Council, which they've already completed at this time. And I will stand for any questions. And I do have Marcos Nava, who is the Executive Director, and Alma Salas, I'm going to mess up her name, Salas, who is their new president, here to answer any questions.
Any questions? Councilor Corn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Nava, could I ask you a couple of questions?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, City Council. Before we start, I'd like to also indicate that Mr. Raquitas, our treasurer, is here in the audience.
Okay.
It's okay.
Well, maybe he'll chime in on some of these answers. So it says in your April 12th letter, 2-page letter, that you coordinate activities with Eastern Roswell. Could you expand on what you put here? How do you all do that? Give me some tangible examples of how it was a success.
Could you repeat that a little bit louder, please? Oh, okay. Ask me again, please.
First bullet point starts on the bottom of the front page,
Mm-hmm.
continues to the second page. You talk about your coordination, I guess, with Eastern Roswell.
Yes.
Can you give me some tangible examples of how you go through that process and what positive results you've had?
Yes, Mr. Corner, since day one, Dr. Sean Powell has spent time with me. Actually, he was the first one to welcome me into the community as the director of the Hispano Chamber of Commerce. We met at his office, and he agreed to be a member of the chamber, and I agreed to support the university in providing subject matter experts on how to reach out to the Hispanic community. In that case, we have had, I want to say 3 meetings with his staff and a director, I believe is Dr. Ramos, who does their strategic plan and reaching out to the Hispanic community. So we have done those type of meetings with the university. It's spending time with them and coaching them how to reach the community. I have given him some advice. Most of them have been acted upon, and some have not. But I enjoy a really good relationship with Dr. Powell.
Okay, I understand that. I know Dr. Powell.
And I'm sorry, one more thing. Out of that relationship, we were able to tap into their finance department And a year and a half ago, they provided 4 seminars, workshops at the office where we were on Main Street with EDC, and we had various members of our chamber come and participate in those lessons regarding marketing, business strategic, how to run a successful business. So we were able to leverage that relationship and have a staff person come and participate. Dr. Powell attended one of those meetings, and he was very pleased with the outcome and the attendance that we had.
What percentage, I know you probably can't give me a hard number here, of your membership attended these seminars? Half of them, 10% of them, all of them?
I can give you a number. And before I give you the number, I want to just give you a little background, maybe a little bit of story, a little narrative. When I came here to Roswell to be the executive of the Boy Scouts, I have come from Orange County, and we would have a jamboree, and we would have 500 kids, or a camporee, we would have 500 kids. Came here, we did a camporee, we had 25 kids. So the answer to your question, we haven't had a great number, maybe 10, 15 people that have attended those sessions, but I think that those 10, 15 people that attended those sessions really came out with a lot of knowledge.
So the second bullet point in your letter, you talk about the Small Business Development Center. Could you go into a little more detail on that?
That's the department from Mr. Scott Butcher that is with the university that presented the seminars.
Okay, is this included in what you've just explained?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. All right. So, of the job fairs that's occurred, 4 or 5, how many of them has the Hispano Chamber co-sponsored, took advantage of, had a booth, whatever you did with those job fairs?
None. And it's not because of not wanting, as far as being there physically having a booth. We have not participated in any, but on a couple of them, I personally went and looked around and talked with the people that were looking for jobs. I want to say, without hurting anybody's feelings or putting anybody down, we weren't invited to participate. So we never we never said no to an invitation.
Okay. So, did you send a notice out to all of your members that this was going on? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess you sponsor it, you get businesses to come in, at least this is what I see happening, to recruit new employees that they are in need of. And so were any of your, to your knowledge,
Yes.
any of your members one of the people that came in and set up a booth, or how did that work?
I don't recall any of our members being there. I know that Mr. Luis Oroz, I forget his last name, a painter in town, was there having a booth. The restaurant, Cerritos, and the one up in on North Main Street. That restaurant, those restaurants were there, but not because I invited them. They were there.
Okay. That's honest enough. So, I noticed in your first quarterly report from 2020 to 2021 that there's lots of, in the dates, lots of discussion about the census campaign. I see it 2 or 3 places in here. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yes, and
So explain to me, please, your involvement in the census.
the 2020 census was an opportunity that was given to me by the mayor then, Mayor Kentai, and the city council approved my being the chairman of that event. It was a total community effort. I was the lead person. I was to recruit numerous chairs, which we had numerous chairs to represent different entities of the business community in the community in Roswell. We had a first ever, from what I hear, the gathering of church leaders at the here at the convention center. We had the educational system was on board 100%, which has never, ever happened. And we were planning to go into the schools, classrooms, provide lessons of the purpose of the census. It just never happened because of COVID. We were supposed to do some events down south where we had a challenge of people responding to the census. But again, we just got hit, and we were not able to carry that out. And then we were going to do that at the Roswell High School and at the airport section. So we did with the best we could. We had, I would say, about 25 faithful committee members. And Mr. Karn, I want to make sure that everyone knows this. This committee worked very hard. We did not make the 50,000 goal that we wanted to be able to show that Roswell is a growing city. We know we have more than 50,000, but we couldn't prove it. But I got to tell you that most people don't realize that the Census Bureau is in our community year-round. And they have a very good idea of what's going on in a community. They projected that we were going to do less than what we ended up having. So we did better than what the census indicated. Yes, we fell short about 1,500 people registered for the census of the 15,000, of the 50,000. I want to say that it didn't happen because of down south. It happened all over. All north, east, west, south could have done better, and we would have probably shown 50,000 plus. So this census was time consuming. It took a lot of my time. Every weekend during the farmer's market, you would see me there, talking to people, signing up people, even had a little dance for them. But we did it, and I'm proud of the efforts of the Census Committee.
So I note in minutes, July 9th, 2020, documents been provided. Two things I want to ask you about, and then I'm going to be through, Mr. Chairman. Believe it or not, I think it says that you got 25,000 for your census work, and the census work you did was by the Hispano Chamber. It wasn't just you individually, correct?
Which one?
I say the census work was done by your organization, not you.
Right.
Okay. And the other thing that kind of jumps out at me is some kind of debt that you owe the Roswell Chamber of Commerce. Where are you on that? Is it paid off now? This is 2020.
We're proud to say that upon agreement of what was it that we owed, we are 100% paid.
Particulars, I just
Yes.
see this. Is it paid off, or?
Yes.
It's totally paid off. It's clear.
Totally paid off.
Thank you,
We
Mr.
never missed a
Chairman.
payment once we agreed on the amount.
I'll yield.
Pressa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, one thing that I do have to say concerning Mr. Nava and the census work that he did, in my opinion, to some degree, that committee had their arms strapped, especially when they needed to go and address individuals of Hispanic names and what have you. Because if everybody recalls, when President Trump was in office, he wanted to have the question on the census questionnaire whether you were a U.S. citizen or not. And so when that happened, a lot of the individuals that would have signed up were very reluctant to sign the census paperwork. And I feel the same thing, that I know, not for a fact, but in just driving around Roswell, I feel that we do have over 50,000. That we had everybody filled out their forms, I think we would have reached the $50,000 population mark, and even go beyond that. And so I kind of sympathize with Mr. Nava, to the point where, had he not been limited to some degree, that he probably would have gotten the numbers that we needed. And I've known Mr. Nava for a while. I think he came in and talked to me when I was the executive director for the Hispano Chamber, when he first arrived here in Roswell. And so I hope that we will take into consideration the amount of work and that the Hispano Chamber is doing, and that the money that we are hopefully that we approve will be put for good use for our community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I got one more little point.
Councilor Corn.
The census deal is a big undertaking.
Huge.
I mean, I fought it from the county perspective, leading up to it till I had to get off. But the other thing, Mr. Nava, this is just a direct question or comment to you. You can take it whichever way you want. Is that I do business at Pioneer Bank, and that's where your offices are now, correct?
Yes, sir.
And there's been several times I've been in there and nobody's at the office. The other day I went by there, you were in there working. But also I noticed there's no time posted on the door, what days you're open, what hours you're open. So how would somebody like me, who's not a member of your organization, be able to contact you and know when would be a good time to stop by and knock on the door?
That's thank you for that. I will make sure that I put that to place. Put an hourly hour that I'm there. City Councilman Corn, I'm a one-man show. It's just me.
Well, I got it.
So
I understand,
the activities are not always at the office. I need to go out and make visits, go out. I belong to other organizations that I committed time, knowledge, that the board has allowed me to participate. The United Way of Chavez, they allow me to participate at the Rotary Club. They allow me to participate at the public library. So many times I'm out in the community working, and there's no one there at the office. But I will take your advice, thank you so much, and make sure that the hours are noted. And maybe if you need to reach me, here's my cell phone. I give everyone my cell phone. They can reach me at any time, but I will post it on the office. Next time you go by there, it will be there.
Well, I think you could post your cell phone with your hours of intended operation. I understand the difficulties you have with just a one-man show. But Mr. Chairman, back whenever I was wearing the brand for the county and their offices were on 4th and Main, every time I went by, I would note, and I can't recall this before your time possibly, that I ever saw the lights on. Just didn't see them. And I was there at different times, depending on what my schedule was that day and where I was going, but I made it a point, because I was usually stopped at that stoplight, by the way. Wish we could time Main Street like 2nd Street, but that's another issue. So, I mean, it's hard for people to come knock on your door if nobody's at home, and that's just a comment, and I'd be anxious to see what happens.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. So actually, that does bring a good question for me. Thank you, Councilman Korn. So you're asking for additional funding, and that additional funding would be to actually try to get a part-time assistant. Is that correct?
To have a part-time person that would work at the office. Also, I think in order for us to, that's mainly, and then for us to go into the next, to take it to the next level, I also want to spend that money on improving our social media outreach and our marketing. So another person helping me there on a regular basis, 20 hours a week, it would be very, very, very helpful.
Which would actually provide for a solid opportunity for office hours that were pretty, because I understand the one-man show as far as having to be out and connecting with the community. It's hard to do that if you're sitting in an office. So, but that, you're telling me that's what that funding is, actually the additions and funding is to actually get someone to be at the office, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nana?
Yes, sir.
A couple questions for you, or even a statement of first, that your letter to Miss Jennings, that you do some great events in this community, and you didn't put them on the letter to Miss Jennings. And a lot of people don't know those events that you put on that bring the community together. And so I would recommend that you let Miss Jennings know everything. Those are positive points of what you're doing for the community, not only just asking for funding, but what you're supplying to this community. And those are events that bring the community together.
Yes.
And I applaud you for those. So I do have a question, and I believe, because this is not your first time to be in front of some of us here, one of the questions was last time was the funds that you receive for your scholarship funds, which are from an anonymous contributor. And I believe the question was, do those get commingled, and then do we have an anti-donation problem? Patterson, you're going to have to answer that question, because if Mr. Nava only has one checking account and those monies get commingled, even though it's a small amount compared to his whole budget, do we have a problem?
Well, I don't want to give an off-the-cuff answer because I would kind of need to learn a little bit more about that question, but I will address that, and I can come back to you with a response on that.
All I'm trying to do is protect you as well.
Appreciate
is
it.
that
Thank you.
set those funds separately from your regular operating funds so that they are not a commingle and never becomes a question in the future. So another question I have for you is, are you working with the EDC as well, so that, I don't know what the Roswell Chamber does, but there are a lot of, I know I get a weekly email from the state EDC. They talk about grants and opportunities, and are you getting those and getting those out to your members so that they can find a different or additional financial avenues to support their business? I mean, what efforts are you doing to help them also? I see you hold the conference here on, or you did with the university, but are you also going down that path of helping these businesses because they don't know about them?
Right.
And what are your efforts, or do you have planned efforts to help the members of the Hispano Chamber?
Yes. So when I was at the EDC office, I led an office space there. I was getting some of the information, and I would pass that along to our members. And since I moved out, I've not kept in touch. But anytime I hear or see something that comes across my screen, I grab the flyer and I forward it to our members. So again, Mr. Chair, the extra staff would help me tremendously to better put our website, to do a better job on our Facebook page, to do a better in that regards. So I know the need, I know it's there. That's why I'm begging, praying for the extra funding so we can get the staff.
I would like to see your commitment to do that. I know, as I'm not a member of your chamber, but I am received from the regular chamber, and they send out a weekly email, shall I say, listing all of these or giving you links to do that I would really like to see that. I don't like to make things happen with a string attached to it, a gift with a string that you pull back because you didn't do it. It's either give you the money or not give you the money. But I would like to see that what your commitment would be to your members to help them find what I call free money from the feds and the state, and how we can help these businesses grow, because we're all about one thing here: successful businesses that will grow and make our economy stronger and better in Roswell.
Yes.
So if I could have your personal commitment that that's what you'll do,
You have my
because
word on that.
I think it will serve your members a lot better.
You have my word on that, and I know it would help our members. You're right. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will ask you the same thing. Is there anything in this contract that you're doing with the city that you would like to see changed? Again, that you are not in total agreement with, because you shouldn't be forced to sign a contract that you don't agree that there's some items that you just can't deal with, but you signed it anyway. So,
Mr. Chairman, my answer to that is 100. I'll be 100% truthful. I have no complaints. I have nothing but gratitude for the city staff, for their guidance, their patience. I do some things real well. No one can beat me. And then I have some things that I need a lot of help. And,
Right.
and the city has helped me tremendously. They've been God sent to me. It's probably one of the reasons why I'm still on board with the chamber.
yeah. Well, I just think it's a fair question for me to ask, or for this committee to ask you, if there's anything that the city should be doing in addition or remove from your contract that would benefit your organization. And so you're saying you're satisfied with the contract?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to have any other comment?
Just thank you for your time. Thank you for your consideration. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nava.
You ready for a motion?
Ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we send this on its way to the Finance Committee.
Second.
Motion and a second that we approve the contract, but move it to Finance Committee for funding.
Right. I think that's what we want to do.
Mr. Chair, just a matter of clarification, what is the amount being approved here for finance to recommend, to consider?
The amount is 50,000, up 20
50,000.
from the previous, and that's the funding increase.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought, Mr. Chairman, that we have a placeholder in the pending FY '23 preliminary budget for the 20,000.
We took everyone,
So we haven't,
oh, it's 30,000.
Mr. Chairman, members of the legal committee, we currently have $30,000 in the preliminary budget today. Originally, we had the 50, and then we had that special finance. It went back to the 30 in order to have the conversation today and to go to finance committee.
we still got some adjustment to do there, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion?
Again, just for clarification, I want to make sure that I understand what the, what we're sending to finance. Is it the 30,000 or is it a recommendation of 50,000?
This document that is in the packet that you are currently recommending and referring to finance has 50,000.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
There being no opposition, motion passes.
Thank
Move
you.
on to item number 4, which is a resolution concerning a record retention schedule, which is one of Parker's favorite topics to talk about.
Love record retention. Okay, so unlike most state entities, agencies, the state law on record retention does not directly apply to the city and to municipalities in general, so we kind of have an ability to set our own record retention policies. And so that's what we have here. I don't know what the record retention policy was prior to this. The city, that's a city clerk function, and when we came on board and we had our, Amalia came as the interim city clerk, we had this question, what are we doing with records? We looked back through the history of the city. We could not find a resolution adopting one in the past. I don't know whether there was one. We can't find it. So we're asking, this one that we have, that we're recommending to you, it comes out of the municipal league. They promulgate this, and it's their recommendation that this is a good one for a city to use. And so we looked through it, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We thought it was a good policy to have, and so that's kind of the proposal here with this document.
Questions?
It is, yes.
I would ask for this a consent motion, please.
Yes, if you would like to make your motion to send it to on the consent agenda, that would be appropriate.
I have a motion.
I'll make the motion that we send it to consent agenda for full council consideration.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
There being a motion and a second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed? Aye as well. There being no opposition, motion passes.
Our next item relates to a proposal to change the governing body rules of order. Right now, this is where staff is just bringing forward to discuss. Basically, right now, for your information and background, the governing body rules were adopted back in 2016. They're kind of the internal rules. So the way that the procedural hierarchy for the city is, of course, a statute trumps everything. Then we have an ordinance, which it governs next. Then we have the governing body rules. And then if there's anything the governing body rules do not cover, then we revert to Robert's Rules of Order. So that's kind of the hierarchy of where we look for what we're supposed to be doing. The distinction, though, between the governing body rules and Robert's Rules versus statutes and ordinances is that rules are procedural guidelines only. Like in Pirates of the Caribbean, they're kind of more like guidelines than rule, right? So they don't bind us. If the city council were to take an action, which was, as long as it followed the ordinances and the statutes, it would be a valid action, notwithstanding it technically violated one of these rules in the governing body rules or in Robert's Rules. So that's why I said the last one, their failure to strictly follow the rules of order will not validate an action. Under state statute, if the governing body takes up a matter, and assuming that it did it correctly under the Open Meetings Act and all that, and a majority votes for it, notwithstanding it didn't go through the correct procedure for the rules, it's still a valid action under law. So these are more like just to facilitate how we do business so that there's not confusion or arguing, well, we do it this way, we do it that way. We have a document and we can all rely on that. The document that's in your packet was submitted by Councilor Oropesa as a sort of a think piece to compare with our existing. The major distinction that I noticed when I read through it is that most of it is very similar, just reordering what's in our current rules of order. But the major distinction that I saw was that, as you may know, when under the current rules, if the governing body takes action on an item, then it cannot take action on that item again for 6 months unless 5 councilors request in writing. What this proposal would do that Councilor Oropesa has provided, it would expand that to include standing committees, and it would require 6, if I recall, instead of 5. So it would require 6 to bring it back, and it would apply to standing committees. So if a standing committee takes final action, or not final action, but takes action on an item, like let's say they said, well, I move to recommend this to council, and it fails because it gets only 2 out of 4 votes, let's say, then for 6 months, unless 6 councilors requested it come back, it would be off limits to all of the committees and to the council, taking in mind what I just said a minute ago about if the council chooses to ignore that, they have the power to do that because they're just rules, guidelines. But that's the major change that I noticed when I read through it. I don't know if Councilor Oropesa, if there was anything else that I didn't check.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chair. You're welcome. You know, one of the things that I've had problems with the rules of order is that they're never clarified certain issues. For example, if an issue dies in committee, it has been the practice of the previous council and probably the previous council before that as well, that item could go to another committee. And if that committee approves it, then it goes to full council. And so my take on that is, if I believe that the committee should have the authority to be able to say yay or nay on any issue. And if it's a nay, then it should die at committee. But that's not the way the rules have, or the way the rules have been interpreted. The other issue that I have is the reconsideration. You know, if you look at Robert Rules of Order, it clearly states that a person on the prevailing side of the issue can make the request to reconsider the issue. Our rules struck out that ability, and it basically said that
the majority.
The majority of the people that were present, regardless of whether they were the prevailing side or not, had the opportunity to reconsider an issue. And so this, or at least in my opinion, I try to clarify that the rules of order should follow the Robert Rules of Order when it comes to a tiebreaker type of thing.
Yeah, and so what you're referring to really comes up when you have situations. So the point of the prevailing side thing with a motion for reconsideration is that somebody who was on against the thing changed their mind, and so someone on the prevailing side, in other words, the side that killed the thing, voted against it, now wants to vote for it, or at least wants to consider it again. And so they've changed their minds. The situation has changed since before. That's the concept of requiring that somebody who's involved in requesting the reconsideration be on the prevailing side in the previous decision, right? That somebody who voted against it before now wants to reconsider it. So something has changed in the meantime. But if you do it with the majority, that creates a situation where you have mandatory majorities. In other words, so like let's say that instead of a majority of those present and voting, like on an ordinance, you have a majority of the governing body, And so you can have a situation where you have a meeting with nine counselors, and you get a majority of those present and voting, 5, but it fails because it doesn't get that 6th vote, which is required by state law, a majority of the entire governing body. So you can have a situation in which a majority lost, right? And so the strange situation that's created in the scenario that Councilor Oropesa is saying is that you can have a situation where a motion for reconsideration comes up, and if it was on an ordinance in the situation I just described, somebody from the majority needs to be in the motion for reconsideration, but nobody's changed their mind truly, because the majority lost. So that's the weird situation that is created by having that language of majority instead of prevailing side. That's sort of a real persnickety rule of procedure there.
I believe we did have that kind of situation to come up at least once that I can recall.
Yeah, no, it does come up, yeah.
You know, and the other item that I addressed is the selection of the mayor pro tem.
Oh, yes, right. Yeah.
My take is winner take all at the very beginning, unless it's a tie vote.
That's right. So in the current rules, you have to get an actual majority and not just a plurality. And so you have situations in which you could have, three candidates out there for mayor pro tem, 3 votes, and 4 votes, let's say. Under Councilor Orepesa's proposal, 4 votes wins it. Under our current rules, you need to get an actual majority. So in that circumstance, in our current rules, 3, 3, and 4, now 3 and 3 go up against each other to see who's going to be eliminated, and then we come back for another vote. That's how the current rules handle it. So in Councilor Orepesa's situation, it would be simpler. You would only need to go to basically kind of like a runoff type of scenario where you have an actual true tie, where you had like 5-5. So that's that. Yeah, I forgot about that one too.
You know, and one thing that I learned when we went to the Mali training that is in the rules of order, was in the rules of order to begin with, and I kept them in here. But I learned, and Councilor Best can correct me, and Councilor Corn can correct me, and see if I didn't misunderstand the discussion that we were having on voting. When a person abstains, our rules currently say that an abstention is considered a yes vote. If I heard the information correctly, at one of the workshops that we attended, was a person can abstain and should not be forced to vote one way or the other.
Councilor, I don't think that's exactly what our current governing body rules say. I think they say you can abstain and it's an abstention, but if you don't answer, it's counted as a yes vote, is what I recall that our current governing body rules say.
I think the language says abstain.
I can look for
If
you.
a person abstains, then it becomes a yes vote. I think that's what it's. And I underlined it because I kept the same language from the previous one. And on our agenda is page 332, toward the bottom. And maybe I'm misinterpreting the information, but I heard that and by not voting, I'm concluding that it's an abstention or a reclusion.
Just give me a minute to find it, Councilor. Just got to pulling it up here.
Should be on section 3. 3F. 3F 2.
So on the current governing body rules of order, it says, okay, voting, a present member who does not vote will be officially recorded as a yea or affirmative vote. A member of the governing body may recuse him or herself from voting on an item prior to the governing body taking up such item. So I see those as two separate things. If you're sitting up here and you've participated in it and the chair calls for a vote and you just sit there and don't say anything, you're counted as aye for it. But if you say at the beginning of the item, I'm not going to be part of this vote, and you take yourself out of it, then, like, let's say that they're 10, you say, I'm recusing myself from this, now you count it out of 9, right? But, maybe we need to say abstain instead of recuse, because abstain is a bit larger than recuse, right? So maybe that's the way to address that. Just a thought.
Okay. Those are the only things that I can think that may be different from the previous rules of order. I don't believe so.
Mr. Patterson,
Yes, sir.
for my own personal knowledge, I'm trying to understand, under item B, under that same section, it talks about agenda, which is,
Hold on, I was looking at the regular rules of order. Do you have the page number that you're looking at? Do you have the page number that you're looking at? The page number?
334.
334, just give me a minute. 334. Okay, and then what's your question?
I just want to understand that, I don't misread this, that it says the city manager is responsible for creating and processing the agenda and agenda materials.
Right.
Then it says the mayor or 6 council members may direct the city manager in writing to place an item that has not been addressed at standing committee.
Right.
Are those the only ways that items get on the agenda?
Well, of course, so a standing committee can recommend it. The city manager can place it on there. And I think under the current rules, the mayor is able to do that. I don't know if it says that here. And then I think under the current rules also, a certain number of counselors can request that it be on writing. And those are the ways that things those are the ways that
Well, I'm reading it a little different than under item 2 there, B2.
the mayor or 6 city councilors, so either the mayor or 6 city councilors can request that an item that has not been recommended through a committee or been placed on the agenda by the city manager can get an item onto the agenda.
So that's the only 2 ways items can get on, or 3 ways that items can get on. It comes either from
The mayor,
or the 6 council members
6 councilors,
or committee.
committee, or the city manager.
I don't see where, I'm trying to understand that. Where is that?
Let's
word?
see. Yeah, you're right. The city manager is responsible. Let me see. Let me compare it to what we have
Place
now.
them on.
That's a good point. Let's see. Let me see what we have.
Just trying to understand what the rules are.
Yes, sir.
Break
Right.
the rules.
And for everybody's information, the reason that I put down 6 instead of 5 the way it was is to try and follow the open meetings resolution that we passed back in, what was it, March?
Yes.
That
Right, and they
said,
had 6.
Major, it didn't specifically say a number, but it said the majority,
Majority, yes. Which is 6 in our case.
be 6.
And to address your question, I think in the past, it is true that the city manager has placed things on the agenda, and I think the way that he is interpreting that is that by being responsible for creating and processing the agenda and agenda materials, that gives him the ability to put something on there in creating and processing the agenda.
Pretty vague language there, Counselor.
Yes, sir. I agree. No one ever brought that to my attention
Trying to
directly
understand
before.
the item to get in, and
Yes, sir.
I don't have the same initials behind your name or behind my name that you have behind yours, but
I think that could be clarified, perhaps when we bring this back. at a later legal meeting, we can maybe clarify that language to express that, either expressly say that the city manager does have that authority or doesn't, rather than inferring it from that paragraph, which I agree.
Because I read it over in another section on page 339, where under item 3 there at the bottom, B3, coming out of committee, it says uncertainty on committee assignment of an agenda item only in cases where there exists uncertainty or disagreement with regard to which committee an agenda item is to be placed. The mayor and or city manager may have full authority to make such final agenda assignments, with the exception.
Right, and I think that's just for standing committee agendas.
That's all that's for?
I believe that, as I'm reading that, that's specifically about only for committee agenda items, not for city council.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because I didn't see it over here, and I see this over here, and I'm going to,
Gotcha,
please
yeah.
explain.
Yes, sir.
So, discussions, any questions?
I guess my only question would be, we're only discussing this today.
Right, that's all it is,
is it the,
discussion item.
would you like us to bring it back next time with maybe some additional changes based on this discussion?
Mr. Chair, I would. I think the 4 points that, the 3 that Councilman Oropesa pointed out were very valid, and then this final one for clarification on that, I think it was page 334, number 1. I think it is very vague and probably needs to be seriously clarified.
Very
But
good.
yeah,
Yes, we can do
I'm
that.
for it.
Because we left it open, Larry might be able to put items on the agenda.
Right.
So, we'll bring it back next meeting, please.
Yes. Yes, sir. Will do.
Thank you.
Okay, this
Now
one.
let's go to item 6.
Yes, we're almost done.
Because I'll tell you what, we've got 15 minutes,
So do
and
you
I'm going to
want-
call for a motion at 5:45 because we have council meeting at 6.
Yes, sir. Well, this one is also a discuss and consider. And I don't know, this was a request from counselors to discuss conditional
Whoa,
use
whoa,
permits.
whoa, whoa.
I don't know what all.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Do you want a tabling motion on this item? You want a tabling motion before we move on this item? Is that what you want to do? Just telling people to hold on, I don't think is proper. That's my personal interpretation. So if you want a tabling motion, I'll move a tabling motion for this item to make sure it gets on the next. Doesn't have to be necessarily put on the agenda because it's on the committee's table.
Be tabled to the next meeting.
That
I mean, we had 2 requests for this item to be put on. So, I'm going to ask those 2 requests if they're willing to accept a table motion. Be respectful to their requests.
Well, I did see Councilor Oropesa stand up, throw his cap my way, so I assume he's not too irate about that.
He could.
I
No,
know.
as a matter of fact, it might give Mr. Mavers a little bit more time to get something in order to be presented. So, no, I don't mind. As a matter of fact, I'll make the motion to table this item.
I'll second.
which one are we tabling? We're tabling conditional use
6.
permits?
Yeah.
Okay,
Item
All right.
6.
very good.
That just clears up the record, I think.
Do we need a motion on that, or, a vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. All those in favor of tabling item 6 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
There being no opposition, so be it. Now we get into department reports.
Yeah, so I'll say legal committee, or the legal department, we're pretty much business as usual. As you'll see, the major item that we've been kind of involved in over the last month is looking at our insurance and where we're at with that. You know, we're generally insured by the municipal self-insured fund. However, that does not cover all of the liability that's out there. For example, they don't cover airports, so we have separate policies that cover our airport. And, you know, we're looking at, do we have adequate insurance for issues like pollution and contamination? We're looking at a lot of that stuff. Do we have accurate policy limits given our liability level? Do we have correct, adequate scope of coverage? So that's something that especially Josh, the deputy city attorney, has really been looking into this last month. Just FYI. And then I don't think we have anybody else here who's submitted a department report, so
You're by yourself.
I am.
They abandoned.
Yeah, that's all I got. Thank you.
I just want to make clarification that I had conversation with the legal department earlier this week and suggested to them that to help them get their work done in a more efficient manner, that they have a hard cutoff date prior to legal committee to receive items for the docket, shall I call it an agenda, from city staff, correct?
Yeah, going forward at your recommendation, and I heartily agree, if you do not, so we publish the agenda on the Friday before, and so if you do not, any item that is not received by the legal department, 3 p.m. on Wednesday does not go on the agenda. Hard deadline. Sorry for you.
Yeah, and all I'm trying to do is allow the legal department to work a little more efficient and not having to be there on Thursday night at 11 o'clock getting items done. But I don't believe it's fair to you all that happens. So I hope you get support from the city manager on that item.
Yes, sir.
Any other items by any other members? There being none, meeting adjourned.